Welcome to the Bold Moves podcast. This is episode 5. We are trucking right along. So far, so good. You guys feeling good about this so far?
This is the one that comes after 4 and before 6.
Yep. Yes, that's a very good sequential analysis, Corey. This is going to be a good one. I can feel it. Today, we're diving into the idea of just the family life and how family can be chaos. Really, it's a family circus sometimes, and it is what it is.
Yep.
Maybe that's just me. I don't know. Maybe you guys don't experience that at all. But there is just a defined and definite chaos that comes from having a family. And whether you have little kids that are growing up or teenagers that are in the house, or you're the parent of adult kids, I'm finding at 46 years old, the stories that I dive into, I think that parenting adult kids is actually worse, as weird as that sounds when your kids are younger. So brace yourselves.
Oh boy.
And in 2024, maybe those adult kids are still living in your basement.
It's possible that they are into their 30s and 40s. It's maybe people like me just still living with mom and dad. It's a free rent. Yes, it's fantastic.
Or like I don't live with my parents. I probably still drive them nuts.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I deal with a lot of people who they fear for their kids. They see their kids making bad decisions as adults, and their hearts are heavy for them. And you're powerless when your kids are adult. And that's tough. That's at least when our kids are running around the house, we have some semblance of control. As teenagers, I can take away a car, take away a privilege, right? Kids, go to the corner, whatever. As adults, you lose that leverage. It's just you're praying for them, you're loving on it. It's hard. So family life is chaos, and how we navigate that matters. And so in this episode, we're just trying to give some helpful encouragement of how you can lead your family toward Jesus. And maybe you're leading the charge in your generation. You're the first family member to say, I've chosen to follow Jesus. And you're breaking a cycle in your family, which is a powerful concept and a great thing to dive into and learn how you can be successful at that. This is content that I think is beneficial for everyone. So when we talk about family chaos and breaking that cycle, like, hey, my family does not follow Jesus. We aren't Christians at all. I am the first one, leading the charge and breaking that cycle. Yeah. That's a big concept. Like, that's a game changer that ripples through eternity. That is no small thing. And for me, I just feel like I need to share this story because in my life, this has been powerful for me and for my story. In our family, the Fisher side, our family was known for being like the worst. Like, our claim to fame was back in the olden days. The fame for us was we ran with the Frank and Jesse James gang. So it's like if you go back in history, like we're, I think, bank robbers and thieves.
The worst.
Gang members, like we're the OGs. I don't know.
I was gonna say, like, were you part of the Hatfields or the McCoys?
I have no idea.
Like, you were in that. Apparently,
that was our family, and so it's like, whoa, how did we become pastors out of all this, right? And so you go back into the 1950s, and my grandpa Fisher, whose name was legendary, his name was MZ Harold. Think about that, EMZY. Never heard of it. That's an original. MZ Harold. He had an encounter with Jesus that changed his life. And he actually turned his back on what was at the time an extraordinarily high-paying job where he would have been very wealthy and money would never have been an issue for him. In his 20s, he encountered Jesus, turned his back on a career that would have been wildly successful, and followed a call to ministry and became a pastor.
It's amazing.
And I never knew that about my grandpa until I was much older, into my late teens and 20s. I had no idea that he had given up that life to follow that calling to be a pastor. And because of that life that he chose, my dad and my uncle both, who grew up in that house, became pastors themselves. Years later, I would go on to become a pastor as well. And it's like, I didn't want that. I ran from that call for a long time. I never saw that coming. But I look back to the heritage of my family, the legacy that I was able to grow up and continue on, and realize it started with my grandpa making an incredibly bold move and breaking the cycle for his family. And I think that's incredibly powerful because we get to have the opportunity of allowing or being part of the opportunity where people say yes to Jesus and it changes everything. Their lives are being changed and they are breaking the cycle. They are leading the charge. And guys, that's a moment, that's a decision that ripples through eternity. And it impacts generations of people to come. And I love that. These are huge moments. So I don't know. How does that resonate with you guys? Do you have any type of relationship or relatability to that concept?
Well, just before we even get into that, it kind of makes me think like there's a cycle on both sides of that. So like, it took a lot for your grandpa to make a decision. I'm sure that was a difficult decision. I'm sure there was a lot that 100%. Went into that. But what that meant was it broke the cycle of a family and flipped it on its head to where it's now. There's a cycle happening again.
Yes.
But it's like in the opposite direction, in the positive direction,
Yes.
heading in the right direction. And I think that's important. That's what we're talking about is if you're in that kind of cycle and it just feels like it's hopeless, making that bold move to be active and to change that and to say yes to Jesus and follow him.
Yeah.
Yes.
Man, it can set your family up for decades.
Yes, it can.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it's never too early and it's never too late to make those kinds of decisions. I think a lot of people, they think, I've missed so many opportunities. It's too late now. No, start now. Start loving on your grandkids. Wherever you are in life, I think those moments of intentionality matter. And I think a lot of times it starts to begin in life when we have kids, right? I think that's true for you. What does that look like in your family, Kristen?
Yeah, I actually didn't learn this until I had my firstborn. My dad told us, when we got married, my mom and my dad, when they got married, they weren't going to church or anything. They were Christians. They grew up in a Christian home, but they just kind of got off the path of going to church and making that a regular habit. And then they had us, their kids, and they said, I think maybe we should just go to church again. And
was it because you were such a terrible child, do you think?
I was an angel.
There it is. Good word.
So it was just a choice that they made, because they wanted their kids to grow up in the church. But now my dad is the leader of this church. He's one of their main people.
That's
and he's
amazing.
really making a difference. So he took us to church just for us, and it changed his
life. Yeah. Which is fantastic. And that's part of breaking the cycle. It puts yourself out in that position and you encounter Jesus and he changes everything. So there is something to the idea of being intentional and kind of answering that question of what kind of family do I want to lead? Where do I want to take my family? Who do we want to be? And I think that living with intentionality and being honest about that question and identifying how am I doing in leading my family to Jesus? What can I do better? What can I do intentionally? That intentionality, that matters. And so we've been kind of talking about that at Crossroads. And today we're bringing in an amazing person to talk to about this. And so honestly, I think it makes sense to just kick it over to 5 Good Minutes. Let's give it up for 5 Good Minutes with Dylan Robinson. Dylan, we are so excited to have you on the Bold Moves podcast. Thank you for giving us 5 good minutes, my friend. It's good to have you.
Glad to be here, man.
So here's the thing. We are talking about breaking the cycle in our families and leading our families toward Jesus. And what I love about this concept is that we have the opportunity to be intentional and make choices for our family that will ripple through eternity. And I know in your story, man, you've broken a cycle, and I know that this means a lot to you. And I would love to just have you share how this idea has impacted you and how it helps you focus in your family for continuing that on to generations to come. I'd love to hear your story and hear your thoughts.
Yeah, man. So a little background. My mom had me when she was 18 years old. She was in high school, and I was in an accident, right? My dad was a professional boxer, fought on ESPN, just all the different sports channels, got knocked out. If you Google him, you'll watch him get knocked out.
I feel like
but my whole life,
his name was Peter McNeely, I believe. He was knocked out in 7 seconds by Mike Tyson. Is that right?
Oh, no.
I mean, can you see the resemblance right here? Oh, man.
I'm sorry.
But
continue. Yeah.
I love it. No, I love it. I think that's the best metaphor, though, because soon as I was born, life was a fight, right? My mom was 18 years old. I had a rare disease where my intestines were on my outside. Man, just everything on the outside looked like this story that's just it's not going well. Yeah. And some of my earliest memories as a kid were mom and dad fighting, and not just fighting, about bills or anything like that, fighting and you knew something really bad was going to happen. I grew up in a trailer out in the middle of nowhere. And so sound just carries in trailers. Right. And so I remember so many times growing up, covering my ears at night, just bawling myself to sleep because mom and dad were fighting and heard bloody murder screaming in the other room. And man, just every single day, it was a fight. right? My dad wasn't just fighting in the ring, it was at home. And that was like my whole metaphor. Just another day, keep on going. Well, I didn't have Jesus in my life. I didn't know that God loved me. Sure, I was a Christian, so I would say I wasn't saved. I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
So I didn't think there was anyone out there who could help me. I didn't think there was anybody out there, man, who was there for me. So it was hard.
Yeah.
As time went on, my parents split up. My dad continued to fight in the ring, out of the ring. Meanwhile, my mom just starts going from drug dealer to drug dealer. And I would stay in these, what I thought were mansions, and I would stay in little rundown motel rooms. And I remember being in rooms where there'd be dope bags and counterfeit money and syringes and weapons and all these different things. And I would go to school the next day pretending like that was normal, right? I was the popular kid. Everything looked good on the outside.
Yeah.
I was broken on the inside.
Yep.
At the age of 13, man, I start experimenting with drugs, right? Lost my virginity about 14 years old, doing what the world told me to do.
Right.
And I was miserable, right? I was the popular dude. I was Mr. Tough Guy, all that stuff, but it was a facade, man. I was miserable.
Yep.
And so by the age of 16, drugs are completely overtaking my life. I was a good athlete. Man, I got put on house arrest. I didn't get to play baseball. Like, my life is going downhill. My mom and dad in and out of jail, in and out of prison. And I grew up the only child for most of my life. But all of a sudden, I have my little brother. And I loved the idea of having a brother, but I was nervous because it was one thing for me to go through the stuff that I did. It was another thing to watch someone else go through that.
That's different.
And man, so the same old stuff. Yep, same old stuff. All of a sudden, the fighting got worse and worse. And man, I saw things that no kid should ever see. Man, I still remember some of the noises in my head sometimes. It was a bad deal. And the cops got involved. They took him out of the house. And man, I'm broken. I'm miserable. My brother's gone. I helped change his diapers. I helped raise him.
Right.
And now my parents locked up, don't have a brother. I'm not going to graduate. I'm like, man, is there anybody out there who can help me?
Yeah.
And can't get into it for the sake of time, but people began to pray for me. And I woke up one day and I knew something was about to happen. I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know that it was Jesus working in my heart. But on February 21st of 2010, God radically transformed my life. And it was the first time I was sober in 3 months, man. And everybody said there's no way that kid can ever follow Jesus. Do you know who his mom is? Do you know who his dad is?
Right.
But man, I believed that God was real. And I knew that my little brother needed somebody to look up to. And so, man, from that day forward, man, I followed Jesus. Obviously, I've fallen short, but I never went back to that old lifestyle. Yeah. And now, 14 years later, my little brother follows Jesus. He's a leader in our church. God is redeeming my family. Still got a lot of brokenness. My mom's in prison as we speak. I haven't seen my dad in 5 years. He's still out, doing his thing. But there were zero biological family members who followed Jesus when I got saved. Now there's about 8 who are following Jesus,
that is awesome.
And God is redeeming my family tree.
That's a beautiful thing.
And what's so awesome is now I'm married. I have the wife of my dreams. I have two little kids. And all they know is that mom and dad are there for them and that Jesus is the center, man. So it's pretty awesome to see what God can do in just a few years.
Bro, it completely changes everything. And you're the one who's led the charge on that. You've experienced life on the other side of that. And yet now you get to be that dad who gives a completely different experience to your kids, man. And I'm telling you, there is something about like the power of making that choice. You are going to be the one that breaks the cycle, letting the power of Jesus transform you. And it's like you said, nobody's perfect. We all have our issues, but you're leading the charge. And now your kids are going to have a completely different experience than you did growing up. And man, you talk about stacking the deck for success and just pointing your family in a direction where you're deciding and you're making that decision. This is the kind of family I want to have. And this is the family I'm going to lead. And Dylan, you're doing it, man. Like that is an incredible story of transformation. Talk to me about that. When you've got your kids, when you think about like how you grew up, where you've come from, where you are now, what are some things that you're being intentional about as a dad, as a husband, to just create that stronger cycle for your family where Jesus is the center of everything? Talk to me a little bit about that.
For sure. So the part that I didn't share earlier was my youth pastors took me in when I was 16 years old.
Yeah.
first people who ever sat down and cared about my story. They asked me questions that nobody else asked. And so, man, I was really developed at the table, eating, drinking Diet Dr. Pepper, right? Very healthy. And just doing life, man.
But whatever. Okay, well, what's okay. Yeah.
Whatever. But I tell you that because my God family just did life with me, and they love me. We went to go watch games together. We just did, what normal families did, all around. But Jesus was the center. And I never saw that, man. And so being a dad now, and I hold my baby boy and pray for him. He needs Jesus, right?
Yes.
He's got a temper, right? He's got my genes in him.
I love it.
But I hold him and I hold my little girl, and it gets me emotional every time talking to him or about them because, man, I get to be what I needed, right? Yeah. I get to be what I needed, and it's it's a cliche for some people. It's not for me, man. I get to be the spiritual leader of, hey, we're going to follow Jesus. It's what we do. We're unapologetic about it. The world's going that way, and Dad did that. Right. Dad did what the world told me to do. Right. And it left me empty and broken. So for me in my house, man, we're going to serve the Lord, and we're going to eat together and drink Diet Dr. Pepper, right? And do the fun stuff together. That's right. So good. Like following Jesus. Yeah. I mean, following Jesus is not boring, man. No, it's the greatest thing in the world. Yes. It's fun. And so, man, just, not just being a Bible thumper or being a preacher, man, we're going to have so much fun. We're going to do a bunch of great things. But Jesus is at the center.
I love it. I love it. Dylan, that's such an encouraging word. And I love your story. And I can affirm from a distance, watching your ministry and cheering you on, man, dude, you're killing it. And God, his presence and his blessing are all over you, man. And I just want to encourage you, keep at it. Yeah. Keep leading the change because you've broken the cycle. And I mean, God's just getting started with you, man. So keep at it. We love you. We're proud of you. Thank you for joining us on the Bold Moves podcast. We're honored to have you. Thanks again, man. We love you.
Hey, man. Appreciate it, brother. You too.
Those were 5 fantastic minutes, maybe 10 fantastic minutes with Dylan there.
Who's counting?
Whatever, it's fine. Yeah. The bottom line is I love him, and I love what he had to say there, and the power of breaking the cycle there. Again, it just reverberates through eternity, and it ripples through generations. And I think it comes down to us being intentional about really thinking about and being determined. Hey, this is the kind of family I'm going to have. As for me and my family, we are going to serve the Lord. There is power in that. And I'm just kind of curious, before we wrap this thing up today, what does that look like practically? Do you guys have specific traditions or strategies that keep Christ at the center of your family? What does that look like? Because I think it's worth talking about. What are the things?
Sure. I mean, well, so for our family, I think we could probably all say this, but we consistently show up to church on Sunday mornings.
It's a great answer. It's probably an obvious answer, but it's an important answer.
Now, it helps that I work here.
That's true. That is true.
So actually just coming to work.
You only get partial credit for that.
Just kidding.
But for real, it's crucial. It's a priority for us. There's not a weekend that goes by unless we're on vacation or something.
Yeah.
And even sometimes then we'll go to a church. Why not?
Why not?
Because that's important. I want our girls to see that as important, even if it feels sometimes like going through the motions a little bit. Even I can think of growing up, we were in church every Sunday, but honestly, was my family always connecting with Jesus consistently on Sunday mornings? Probably not. There were moments where it probably was a bit of a struggle to get us all there on Sunday morning, but we were there.
You built the habit.
And it was a habit for me when I went off to college. I didn't stop going to church. There's never been a season of my life where I didn't go.
Sure.
And that's not to bang my own drum and to make me sound great, but it's instead just to say just going is a big deal and make that a priority, because we all have however many hours in a week. We've got 24 hours in a day. I know that math.
But you're crushing it. You're the rest of it, winning in math.
We get to choose how we use those hours.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things that fight for our time.
Yep.
And Sunday mornings, man, and it doesn't have to be Sunday morning. At Crossroads, we have a Thursday night service, and there's other ways and times to connect with you. But do something and make it consistent.
Yeah.
And because there's always going to be something else that's going to creep up and want to take your time.
Yeah.
But it matters to make that a priority. And I think that's a big deal.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah.
Kristen, how about you? You guys have any intentional moments or strategies?
Well, I mean, I had a moment where I kind of made a decision for my family. Like we're always church going people.
Right.
I remember when I was pregnant with my oldest son, I had a lot of anxiety around losing him, like miscarrying, and because that's kind of a pattern that I've seen in my family. So I thought, well,
that's
maybe
scary.
I'm gonna lose this baby, and I had a ton of anxiety, and I don't typically have like much anxiety when it comes in that area. But I remember I was driving and I was very anxious, like just praying, and I really felt God say, He's always been mine.
Yeah.
You know, like his like I'm going to, like, you know, He'll be your son, but really He's mine.
Yeah.
And I've really focused on that. My children, or even just my husband and myself, like our souls belong to God, and I need to care for that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we go to church.
Yeah.
I try to be intentional with who we're around, and are they directing our souls, you know, towards Jesus?
Oh, I'm a big believer in that. Like surrounding your kids with people who are great examples for them to follow, right?
Yes.
I want to stack the deck for success and put as many quality people around my kids as I possibly can. Sadly, the people that I know are like people on staff at churches, and they're the worst. I mean, let's just be honest. I kid. So my kids get to know all kinds of amazing people, and I love that. I think for us, like from the very beginning, I was really intentional about praying over my kids. I went in. It sounds creepy when you say it out loud, but I would go in after they fell asleep every night when they were little, until probably when they were 10, 11 years old, and just pray that blessing over them. God, would you bless them and keep them? Would your face shine upon them and be gracious to them? Turn your face toward them and give them your peace. I just believe that it's true. In scripture, God told Moses and Aaron in the book of Numbers, when you pray that prayer over my people, I place my name on them. And I'm going, I want God's name on my kids. Like I'm going to cover them in prayer. I mean,
so you don't go in there anymore?
I don't. I got lazy. I just pray for them in general now.
Well,
that
was my question. Like, was there ever a time that one of them woke up and looked right at you?
That would have been startling. Like,
like, what are you doing, Dad?
I avoided any weird or awkward or crazy moments. Yeah. But I will say what we do as a family now is before they go to bed, we still do this. We gather together in random rooms in the house and we pray together before we go to bed. We just keep that in front of us every day as a family. We're praying together. It's to the point where if it's late or we're kind of scattered, like one of my boys will come in like, hey, I'm going to bed. Are we praying or what? It's become their routine. I love that. So it's centering our families around Jesus. And it's deciding definitively what kind of family do I want to have. And I'll just say this again as we come to a close. It's never too early. It's never too late to start. Decide what kind of family you want to have. If you need to break the cycle, lead the charge, and God will honor that. I think we can easily say that if you decide to make that decision to break the cycle, God will honor it, God will show up, and He'll be faithful.
Well, yeah. I mean, it even thinks we can get in our own head and say it is too late. And we can say that to ourselves and discourage ourselves from making a decision. But even, we're not too far removed from the Easter season.
Yeah.
And Jesus hanging on the cross, there's two examples next to him. And one of them made a decision to change his life right there.
What a beautiful moment that is. Yeah. And it changes everything.
It is not too late until that moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a bold move.
That's right.
That can change the entire trajectory of your family. Yeah. So we challenge you today when it comes to your family and breaking the cycle. When it's time to make that bold move, be bold. We'll see you next time.